everyone, it's Kaylee at Calumet. In today's video, we're going over Superbox wiring and bringing power to your Superbox, wiring in your pulse meter and other accessories, so stay with me. Today we're going over Superbox wiring and accessories and how to bring power into your box. So let's start with the outer portion of the box. It is IP54 rated, which means that it can be out in the elements. That's the exterior box, not this inside box here. So this box, if you have that, can be out in the elements. It also goes from -4 Fahrenheit to 131 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's not going to prevent the box from actually pumping. You could still put it in bypass, but your LCD screen here, that's going to freeze when you hit the -4. So you want to be careful about that. We do sell a little heater that can be mounted in the side of this box if it's going to be in a cold environment. Over here to the left, we have the USB port. So you just want to make sure that that lid is screwed on tightly. You don't want to get any water in here. So just make sure when you're done using that you do replace that lid. So we're going to go ahead. So there's 6 screws in this box. And we're gonna take off the faceplate. Now we wanna be careful when we remove the faceplate. You see this green ribbon cable in here. If that is connected and you jerk off this faceplate, that will get damaged. This ribbon's really fragile. You don't wanna let the faceplate hang off of this ribbon. So you wanna be careful about that. So just disconnect all of them and then set your faceplate off to the side while you're working on the box. So we're gonna talk about incoming power first. So this is going to be your terminal here for your incoming power. So we're going to get our cord here. And if you see, there's some micro flathead screws in here that just open this up for us. So we're going to open all of those up and then we're going to bring in our hot ground and our neutral. So hot is going to be our L right here. So we're going to put our hot wire into that. PE is going to be our ground. So we're going to put our ground wire into this terminal. And then our N is going to be our neutral. So that's where we're going to put our neutral wire. We're just going to tighten that back. And then we're going to make sure that our wires are in there nice and tight. And if they're not, go ahead and just loosen those teeth again, tighten them back up. All right, so we've got our wires in there nice and tight. Just gonna plug our terminal back in. So now that's gonna be our main power coming into the box. It needs to have its own breaker. So dedicated breaker just for the box, not shared with anything, no lights in the parking lot, no pumps, just for the box. Needs to be a 20 amp breaker. This box is gonna be separated from anything else. So now we're gonna talk about wiring in our meters. So over here on the right hand side, we have A, B, C, D, and E. So all of these are going to correspond to our pumps over here, which are going to be in our larger terminals. So we're going to start with A. We're going to take our FMT3 meter. This is our FMT3 meter here. This setup is going to have 2 wires, a brown and a white wire. So we're going to take this terminal block out here. Now, when you have this 2-wire setup here, you're going to be going into IMP1 and you're going to be going into ground. So our white is going to be our signal, which is going to go into our IMP1. Same way as the terminal block for the power. We're just going to unscrew them, open the teeth, and then tighten them back up. Now, in these terminals, this is where your other accessories can go as well. If you have a wired level probe, that's going to go into UB plus and UB minus. If you have a nozzle switch, that's going to go in ZV1 and ground. Now remember, that needs to be a low voltage nozzle switch. You cannot put a 110 nozzle switch in this terminal. This terminal is 5 to 12 volts DC. That's the max that it can be. So this is gonna be our wiring for our FMT3 meter here. We'll just connect our terminal back in there and set this one off to the side. And then we have our other kind of meter, which is an FMOG. All of the FMOGs with displays have the same wiring configuration. So this is what the FMOG is going to look like if it has a display. If it does not have a display, it's going to have these two wires just like the FMT3 as well. So on the FMOG here, we've got 4 wires that we can use, but we're only going to need 3 of them. So we're gonna put this in for pump 2. So our UB plus is gonna put out between 5 and 12 volts DC. So we're gonna put our yellow wire into this terminal. We're gonna just tighten it up here. And then our white and our green are both signal wires. If you have another system that you're wanting to use an FMOG with that requires dual signal, you can always use this. In this instance, our box only requires 1 signal. So we're just gonna use the white and we're gonna put that into the IMP1. And then our brown again is gonna be our ground. So if you have a nozzle switch, you are going to end up with 2 wires in your ground. So you just wanna make sure you know that you're putting both of them in there. It's not a mistake, they are both supposed to go in the ground. So this is what it's gonna look like if you have an FMOG wired into the box. So that's gonna be our meter wiring. So this one's gonna be for pump 1, this one for pump 2. Now we're gonna talk about our pump wiring. So here we have our RIB contactor, which we use mainly because it's got a closed, open, and an auto on it. So if you're wanting to bypass, auto is standard. That's gonna mean that it's waiting on the box to be authorized before the contactor is gonna kick in. The closed is gonna put you in bypass and the open is gonna do nothing. So if you're out there installing and you're wanting to test out your pump, you can always switch it to closed. If your pump kicks on, that means we have it wired right. And there may be a setting wrong if you're not getting that whenever you're, authorizing your dispense point. So now we actually have 5 wires on this contactor. We've got a black and white, a yellow and white, and a blue and white. The blue and white is not gonna be needed. So you guys can either clip that or cap that, whichever you'd like. The black and white and the yellow and white are going to go in our larger pump terminals. So we're wanting to go in the 4th terminal, which is the HV, and then the 6th terminal, which is the N. So our black and white is going to go into the HV. And then our yellow and white is going to go into the N. So what you should be getting out of this HV and N whenever the box is authorized is 120 volts, which is going to activate your contactor. So that's all that we want our box to do, is activate the contactor, and then you should have separate power going into the other side of the contactor. So this has its own breaker, remember, so all this is doing is giving power to the contactor to authorize and work. So on the 2 orange wires, you're going to have 1 orange wire that's your other line from the breaker. So whole separate breaker. This is going to be your hot from that breaker. This is going to be your hot to the pump. So all we're doing with these 2 wires is breaking the hot, so we're controlling it with this relay here. We're gonna set that to the side. So for each dispense point, as many dispense points as you're using, you should have a separate contactor. So this is A, B, C, D, and E, and then you just wanna match up the meter to its corresponding pump. So now there's also a bypass feature on the board. What this is gonna do is immediately put 120 volts out to this pump terminal. There's one for each dispense point. So if one's down and the rest are working, you can just put one into bypass. The easier way is to do it from the contactor relay, but it's up to you, whichever is easiest for you to get to. Now let's talk about the contactor relay as well. This is not weatherproof. So we do need to make sure that this is mounted either inside this box or inside a separate poly box, because this is not meant to be out in the elements. So now if we want to bypass any of these, we're just going to move these dip switches here over. So that would mean that 1 and 2 were in bypass, and then we have 3, 4, and 5. We could put them all in bypass. So that's how you bypass on the board. Talk about the board a little more. This is where your socket modem's gonna go. So if you have any kind of upgrade, this is where your chip would install. This is where your Cat 5 would install for a LAN or a configuration with a modem. So this is just where it would plug in. You just wanna make sure that your pins are lined up properly. This is, you're only gonna be using the first 2 dip switches on here, if at all. So your number 1 dip switch, if you get a box from us, a lot of times these number 1 dip switches come up. It's asking you to initialize it whenever you receive it. So that means go through and kind of, you know, set it up, make your serial number, change your code. We'll go over that a little bit more when we get into these Superbox menus. And the number 2 is just gonna put that into a demo mode. So you can have the number 2 up. It's gonna create ghost pulses on any of these dispense points for you to demonstrate to one of your customers. That's gonna be counting. So if you start your box, you're not pumping any fuel, and you started a transaction and your pump's not on and you're getting pulses, a lot of times this number 2 is up. So you just wanna make sure that's down if you're going into regular operation. Dip switches here, not gonna be used. Those are for programming in-house. And then we do have 2 fuses, one on the bottom board and one on the top board. They're 5 by 20 millimeter, 10 amp fast flow fuses. You do wanna make sure that you have spares of those in case one of them blow. And that concludes our wiring and accessories for the Superbox.